Hi everyone, welcome to BONNIECAROLLEE Makes Cards. I have some sweet mini slimline Christmas cards featuring Altenew's BIRCH Impressions and one of my all-time favorite Christmas sentiment sets, Holiday Wishes. This video focuses on an easy resist technique, stamp first, ink blend later. So let's get started. I want the birch trees to have some depth on the panel, so I start off with my favorite things, Drifts and Hill stencil. I'm placing it where I want my horizon to be. I use a little bit of washi tape to hold it in place and then pop it into my MISTI. BIRCH Impressions is a layering stamp set. There are 2 different trees and 4 stamps per tree. The first trees that I'm stamping, I want them to be in the background, so I'm using the stencil. I'll be working with Distress Oxide inks, and because I'll have an ink blended background, I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'll begin by using one of my lightest colors to stamp the solid image, Milled Lavender. The next 3 stamps will add some beautiful detail to these birch trees. The stamps are easy to line up. For the second stamping, I'm using a beautiful light gray pumice stone. Because I'm stamping many trees, I don't worry about cleaning stamps. I'll save that for the end of the project. The third layer will be done with the darkest color, Hickory Smoke. With each layer, the birch trees begin to look more realistic. It's really quite an amazing stamp set. I'm going to finish off my 4th layer with a nice soft purple shaded lilac. No worries if the stamps aren't exactly lined up. It just adds to the unique quality of each tree. Because Distress Oxide inks can take a while to dry, they are a perfect choice for this technique. I'm going to coat them with clear embossing powder. When the powder is melted, the trees will resist the ink that will be applied in the background. This is another panel, and for this one I'm going to start by stamping the birch trees in the foreground. All of the trees for my cards have been layered with the same colors, again starting with the milled lavender, the second layer with pumice stone, and then moving on to hickory smoke and finishing up with shaded lilac. I don't bother to heat emboss these trees until after I have stamped my 3rd tree. The slow drying oxide ink will allow me to emboss all of the trees at once. For one of the panels, I got pulled away from my craft room right after I had done the stamping, so by the time I got back, that ink was dry. I took the first layer, which was the solid stamp, and re-stamped the trees with Versamark ink and then embossed them. Because I'm stamping the trees several times and not cleaning the stamps, there is some ink residue. So the stamp is not sticking to the stencil. I don't bother taping it. I just use my magnet and it holds it in place fine. After the trees are embossed, I'll be ready to do my ink blended background. For each of the panels, the stencil is lined up, so it is at the bottom of the background tree in this case, but trees in all the other cards. For my 2 nighttime cards, I start with my lightest color and work towards the top with the darkest. This dusky night sky is being created with spun sugar, seedless preserves, and black soot. The ink is applied several times, extending one color into the next until there is a nice smooth blend. The stencil is moved down so that I can apply a little bit of ink at the base of the trees in the foreground. I want just a narrow band of color, so the ink is being applied with an ink dauber. I applied seedless preserves, and then to tone it down, I just grabbed one of my ink daubers that I had used with dark blue ink. There was enough on it just to soften that shadow. For my next panel, I used a combination of tumbled glass, pumice stone, and ice spruce. Again, the stencil is dropped down and I use a dauber to apply a thin line of ink at the base of the trees in the foreground to create a shadow. A little bit of paper towel removes the ink off the trees. The background for this card was done with wild honey, picked raspberry, and black soot. The last panel was inked with scattered straw, dried marigold, peacock feathers, and chipped sapphire. Using a No. 1 watercolor brush, all of the panels were spattered with watered down gouache. And as usual, I can't seem to apply spatter to cards without spattering my hand as well. I chose 4 different sentiments from Altenew's Holiday Wishes. They were stamped with black VersaFine ink. Spellbinder's mini slimline nested card creator was used to cut all of the panels. They were mounted on foam and then placed under my MISTI so that there's good contact between the foam and the paper as it dries. These panels were mounted on black cardstock that had been die cut with the next largest die in the Spellbinder's nesting die set. They were mounted on card bases that measured 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches. I had to have some sparkle, so I added in some clear sequins and topped them off with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. And that wraps up this set of cards featuring Altenew's Birch Impressions with sentiments from Holiday Wishes. The stamping layers to create the birch trees are very easy to use, as easy as it is to create a resist for a beautiful ink-blended background. Links to the products used to create these cards can be found in the description of my YouTube video or on my blog. As always, I appreciate your visit.